Alright, what's up y'all, it's LakerFan here. As you can spot out of today's video, we're ranking every build height in NBA 2K25 in tiers, starting from 5'9", going all the way to the 7'3". So, obviously, when you look at those two heights, there's a huge discrepancy between them in terms of the stature of them, but everything in between has such a different gray area of which ones are good, which ones are bad. You could talk about the versatility of the defensive end of things between 6'7" all the way to 6'9", and how they can really guard anything between the bigs to the guards. And then also you could talk about like the stretch bigs type like ball handlers at 6'10", 6'11", which guard heights are meta between the 6'3", 6'4", stuff like that, even 6'2s for that matter. And then obviously we're talking about the bigs, which ones are too big for their own good, but there may also be some cases where, let's say 2v2, 1v1 court, stuff like that, it also still applies. So you have to kind of factor in a lot of different things, but I'm here to just give my take on which builds are good, which ones aren't. So I hope you all enjoy the video. If you do, feel free to drop a like, sub if you're new, turn on noties, all good stuff, and like always, try to win to 2,000 likes. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going from the shortest to the tallest, so for those of you out there that want to check out the bigs, either I encourage you to be patient, or if you would like to fast forward through the video and find the, type of area of the heights that you're more concerned about, feel free to obviously skip through wherever you would like. But anyway, let's get right into this. So starting us off, 5'9", I'm going in the A tier. This is still a very good height as far as the attribute investment. It is a huge spike in terms of anything else you can get for any other heights, and that's why we'll talk about like 5'10". 5'11's okay. We'll get to those in a second, obviously. But again, like the difference of going from 5'10 to 5'9, you get like literally 4 extra attribute points to be investing into your build, and that goes a long way. And obviously it stacks up and compares to a lot of the other heights as far as like just giving you way more to invest into. So a lot of guards out there, like the competitive players, let's say 5s and 3s more specifically, nobody's coming into a 1v1 court on a 5'9", we already know that, and nobody's really coming into the 2v2 court on a 5'9" either. Rare cases, very, very rare cases, and the reason for that is because they can literally not guard anybody in the paint. It's just impossible. It doesn't matter if you have block on them, vertical, interior defense, anything like that. They just can't bang with anybody down low. You could be the most brain dead, terrible player on really low ratings and stuff like that on pretty much anything 6'4 through 7'3", and a 5'9" just literally can't guard it. And honestly, in some cases, even like, I would even argue any build in the game. I think if two 5'9s clash heads on one going at a layup and then the other one trying to defend it, I think the offensive player just wins naturally more often than not. So let's get to the reason why these are good. Obviously, in 3v3 and 5v5, the 3-hunting point guards that truly are all in on offense and are just trying to be really hard to guard and bring a lot to the table. We're talking ball handle, speed with ball, high three-pointer, decent layup, all that stuff, even maybe the ability to dunk. 5'9s don't get very high on the dunk though. I think it's like a 75 maximum for that matter, unless you like max out the wingspan like crazy, but it's not something that people do in the first place. But point being, it gets everything you could ask for on offense, and then still can have really elite steal rating and stuff like that, good perimeter as well. But in a world where it's hard to contest a shot and it's hard to play interior defense, 5'9s, it's really tough. So it's really for the people that are very skilled at the game, and it has a high ceiling, a really low floor though, for that matter. So you could argue like B tier, but I'm just putting it in A because you can see the peak level of this can be very elite, especially after the patch where the 3-hunting is just looking at an all-time high in this game, and it's hard to guard for sure. So anyway, I know a very long-winded explanation on the 5'9", but the rest of the video will be very condensed and quick. Of just talking about like the guard heights and stuff like that until we get to the ones that are actually worth talking about. So 5'10", bad. It's just one of the worst heights in the game because of the fact that if you go 1 inch shorter, you get so many extra attributes and there's no point, essentially. It's more of a compare and contrast, if you will, between the two heights. And when you could go 1 inch down and get so many more ratings, there's just no point, if you ask me. So same thing applies to the fact that on the other end of it, the 5'11 is actually pretty good. So we're putting 5'11 in the B tier. Again, it kind of just spikes in terms of the attributes. I just loaded up the builder just to double check and make sure all of my opinions remain actually factual. And yes, it's definitely the case that 5'11s just get more attribute points than 6 foot and 5'10s and stuff like that. I don't know why they would decide to put certain spikes in stuff like that. I just don't know why it wouldn't scale perfectly as far as like the shorter you go, the more attributes you get, and keep it as simple as that, because the same thing applies to bigs actually, for that matter. 7-footers get significantly more attribute points than anything else between 6'11, 6'10, 7'1, anything like that, and it's just a weird spike range that a lot of these heights just happen to have. So 5'11, we'll talk about, once again, the max plus ones, the utility of certain builds, talking about how once you get to some of these ranges and stuff like that, some are either too tall or too short to play a certain position. But for the guards, a lot of it just remains whatever gives you more attribute points. It just makes sense, while still being in the certain thresholds that are really respectable to have. So in this case, 6 foot, we're putting in the E tier. It's also just mid, really bad. It's like the same thing as, you know, 5'11", just you get less points. So just doesn't make sense to make. Now, for 6'1s, it's also pretty much the case. And once again, it remains just not a build height worth making, because why make a 6'1" when you can make one of the best build heights in the game? And that is 6'2" and 6'3". So for both of these, they're going the S tier. Again, I really cannot stress the fact that you just get more attribute points than every other height in the game, as far as like the 6 foot, 6'1", you know, 5'10", 5'11", stuff like that. You do get more on the 5'9", obviously, but then you make a nice jump up to the 6'2", 6'3". So these are like the main 3 heights you see point guards use in 2K25. 6'4" also applies. We'll talk about that in just a second. But what I also love about the 6'2" and 6'3s, and now we're going to finally, you know, slow it down a little bit and talk about these 2 heights, because they truly are one of the best and 2 of the best in the game as far as like the utility they bring to the table. You could be a point guard or a shooting guard while running this. We even run Apollo recently as our lockdown as a 6'3", because they get so many attribute points, and it does take a tough jump as far as like less attributes when you go to 6'4". That's why we ended up deciding on the 6'3" for him. It got so much more, you know, 3-pointer availability, perim D, stuff like that we could invest, you know, and these are all just buying extra attribute points in comparison to the build height taller than it. But it's not like, you know, it's unlocking further caps. It's not like a 6'4" can't get 99.3 compared to a 6'3" can. It's just the fact that you get more ratings to work with. We'll talk about maximums for sure once we get further into the video again, but yeah, 6'3", 6'2", so good. The driving dunk ability gets, you know, completely usable once you get to these ranges as well. You can go like 89 to 93 in some cases as well. Get the small guard contact dunks. That's what like 6'3s are good for. 6'4" brings a lot more to the table defensively. However, it does get less attribute points. We are going to be putting it in B tier, but it's very high B tier. Consider it to be just on the fringe of being A, in my opinion. I don't think it belongs in the same discussion of the 2 builds that are going to be going in A, but for like the lockdowns out there that are playing very perim lock oriented and stuff like that, 6'4" can be very good. For the people that just want to make a taller shooting guard build as well, 6'4" is also very good. So respect it for sure. I don't believe it belongs up in the A tier with the 5'9" and the other height that we're going to end up putting in here, but it's like definitely better than the 5'11" for that matter. So you just think of it that way, and it's top of the B tier as for sure. But anyway, moving along, I do want to talk about how now we're into another area where the height just kind of falls off a little bit. And considering this is the shortest build height that doesn't get any of the good dribble styles or anything like that, I'm putting 6'5" in the F tier. I truly don't believe there's any reason to make a 6'5" in this game. 6'4s, you could make it as a 2-guard build, a lockdown build, whatever you want to do with it, but whatever it is, you could literally have 86 speed with ball, and it'll be the complete night and day difference of movement on anything you could do in this game, and all the other good animations that come with this of being a small guard, the jump shots as well, everything included. It's such a discrepancy between being 6'4 and 6'5, and being 6'5 doesn't really bring anything to the table, hardly at all for that matter. And where it does start becoming worth bringing to the table is the 6'6". So that's why you're seeing 6'5" at the F tier, even though it's only 1 inch away from 6'4 and 1 inch away from 6'6". It's the value of these things. So at 6'6", you can unlock Paint Patroller, and it's just in general a height that I would respect at a lockdown position a little bit more. Now, I'm personally not a huge fan of 6'6", but I do know there's a lot of lockdowns in the community that are using 6'6" builds, and it's obviously to maximize the speed and agility and stuff like that. I do believe personally that 6'7s are a much better perim lock that can still have a lot of versatility to switch on to bigs, and that's where this range of height becomes extremely useful in my opinion, and that's why I'm a huge lover of the 6'7, 6'8, and 6'9. All 3 of these heights are just so amazing in this game. So you're gonna see us start, you know, filling out the top of the tier list for sure in this area. But to just address the 6'6" one more time, it's obviously meant for the fight through perim locks and stuff like that, where I do believe 6'4" is even just as good, in my opinion, if not better, and provides a whole lot more offensively if you happen to be like a 5-out team that needs a hash shooter or something like that, or a secondary ball handler that happens to play lockdown, because in this game, I do think running bigs in the corner is a good idea, or you could run like 2 bigs in the corner and play a 6'4" as your shooting guard technically at the lockdown position. Then you could have your point guard on the hash, because even like I would argue 6'2s and 6'3s can play really good hash defense as well. So long story short, the vision that I see of 6'4s is that it can bring a lot more to the table as a shooting guard that happens to play lockdown. But if you want to be a true blue, fully invested lockdown, I guess 6'6 obviously makes more sense to create than 6'4 would, just because of the fact that it gets a lot of the same speed and agility similarities, but doesn't bring as much to the table offensively, obviously. But anyway, moving along. 6'7", 6'8. They're both going in the S tier. These are absolutely 2 of the best heights in the game. You know, you could even argue not only are they great for lockdowns, they're great for bigs. People are out here running 3v3 on 6'7 and 6'8 bigs all day because the versatility and the utility of that is so important. Like, being able to switch on every screen with your lockdown is so crucial. So when you run 2 6'7s or 2 6'8s at the 2 and the 3, it just becomes the most unbeatable combination to like try and crack the code on and pick and roll. And you can't get a matchup switch on either of them, because if you implement them into a screen at all, they can just switch everything. So you're not chasing anybody in terms of the matchup, and neither of them are harder to go at as far as like a big man guarding them either. So it's just a really tough position to be at as far as attacking two of these builds together in the pick and roll defense. And you see so many people, I'm talking, it almost feels like it's 80% of the games I play that are competitive on the threes. It's 2 6'7s or like a 6'7 and a 6'8 or something like that. Now, when you do go up to the 6'9", this is still a very good big man height, but it's a little bit less common on threes. Now, I will argue for sure that 6'9s are better as far as being a big on fives than a 6'7 or a 6'8 would. I think this is a little bit too much of a joke height when it comes to playing fives as a big, but the other utility that they bring to the table is their great back end heights. People playing power forward on them. So essentially, this year's game is dominated by 6'7, 6'8, and 6'9 builds all the way from the 3 to the 5. Whether that's the case of playing 2s, you see them at the big. When you're playing 3s, you see them at the 2 and the 3. When you're playing 5s, you see them at the 3 and the 4. Maybe sometimes the 5, but it's a little bit rare, obviously. I would argue 6'9 is not so crazy, but yeah, you definitely see footers and stuff like that at the 5 more. So when I'm talking 5s, it's more likely that they're at the 3 and the 4. But these heights are constantly in the game. You're hard-pressed to find any game that you play where people aren't using them. And it's tough, man. They are just so good as a lockdown, so good as a power forward, and then still featuring as a big man on the 3s big time, even 2s as well. So anyway, moving along, we have the 6'9". This is our other height that's going into the A tier. So this is going to be just an absolutely good big man build as far as being an undersized. I think this is something that works great on 5s. It's one of my favorite heights to run as an inside center. And, you know, I compare it to the 6'8s that I have and stuff like that. The 6'9 provides just so much more ability to get offensive rebounds, because when you max out the wingspan and stuff like that, add the weight, 6'8s just don't get enough offensive rebound maximum. It just doesn't work out that way. 6'9s get so much more. It works better as a big man height for sure for the 5s. And while they are quite a bit slower, most 6'9s I think drop about 5 speed in comparison to the 6'8 if you're looking at the same level of brick wall and stuff like that. But it's just tough when you add up all the badges, in comparison to the 6'8. You lose so much ability to get like Hoff Interceptor. You're down to like, let's say Gold Interceptor. Maybe even in some cases just can't even afford it that much higher because of the wingspan being shorter. Stretch bigs out there. I'm sure a lot of you guys have resorted to the 6'9 in some cases because you like the wing jumpers more than the bigs, or if you like the big jumpers more, it might, kind of derank the 6'9 a little bit in your opinion. But what the 6'9s do bring to the table, however, that I want to start talking about is the max +1 tier slots, if you will. So with the 6'9s, they get a very unique combo where you can get, like, let's say Interceptor in tier 1, and then for the tier 2, you actually get on-ball related badges. So it's things like on-ball menace or Challenger, stuff like that. Obviously, a movable enforcer is a tier 2 for a ton of different builds and stuff like that, so we're not even going to talk about that particularly, but it is interesting that the 6'9s get things like Challenger. So even though your Prim D max is much lower than a 6'8, you actually could get a really good value max +1 on that. Or in some cases, I'm going to talk about how me on my 6'9 playing big man, I can get something like Rebound Chaser in tier 1, then Brick Wall is a tier 2 max +1, which is really good for the bigs and stuff like that. That's not the case for 6'10, 6'11, 7 foot, anything like that. It's a tier 1 on Brick Wall and a tier 1 on Rebound Chaser. So you can't double them up or anything like that. So for an undersized big man height, it's really good. And just in general, like I said, it's so valuable in terms of the speed, agility, the fact that you even can get the perimeter defense related badges like on-ball menace and stuff like that. And it just fits so good versatility-wise. You can still guard perimeter. You can easily guard interior with it as well. And it's one of my favorites in the game. It's just obviously it only is a little bit more related to the bigs. It's a little bit more rarely used on 3s, in my opinion, because it's so perimeter defensive oriented and speed related and stuff like that. So you see the 6'8 and 6'7 bigs a lot more on 3s, but for 5s, makes a lot of sense. It can still fit at the power forward on 5s as well, which is obviously still a nice utility to it. And it's a good big man on 2s as well. So big fan of the build overall. Now let's go ahead and talk to the 6'10. So the 6'10, I'm so intrigued by it because there's so many things about it that can be valuable. There's a couple of different big man animations like Giannis crossover and stuff like that that are valuable and you can only get at the big. There's a lot of big man jump shots that are pretty solid as well. Now, a lot of bigs will tell you that they would rather the animations that you can get for the wings, because a lot of the post-related badges, post-related animations, if you will, are kind of capped into those, where post hops, stuff like that, they're kind of tied to the 6'9" rather than the 6'10" as far as being in the wings height rather than the bigs height. But anyway, to cut to the chase, I'm still going to be putting the 6'10" and the 6'11" in the C tier. It's just really tough to justify making either of these builds when the 7-footer gets so many more attribute points. I'm talking an unreal amount. I was once in your shoes, if you don't know what I'm talking about, where I was thinking 6'11s are so much better than 7-foot. They get things like Shifty Shooter, Challenger, a Movable Enforcer, a tier higher as well. It's like everything works out so good for them. And, they can get the lightning launch, they can get good dribble styles and stuff like that too. Technically the 7-foot also can with the Zion at like 60 speed of ball. But anyway, point being, there was so much more to the brought to the table as 6'10 and 6'11s. But the truth about these build heights is that they're really only good as an ISO stretch big slasher, if you will, where they bring a lot to the table driving, dunk, maximum wise for slashers. They bring a lot to the table as far as animations with ball handle. Again, I really do want to put that Giannis crossover in mind as far as one of the best animations in the game. It's just you can only get it at pretty much 6'10", 6'11", and very minimum wingspan 7-footers. But point being, I don't really think they're comp build heights, if you will. I don't really think they fit on 5s as the best center build. I don't think they fit on 3s, period, because they don't have enough speed and perimeter, in my opinion, to play like the competitive ball. And then they fit okay in like 5s as a power forward, if you will, but I still think the 7-foot is significantly better in that regard. And what we're here to talk about with the footer, I know I will be discussing post scores a little bit with these remaining 3 heights, and I do want to keep that in mind a little bit, but what I do want to tell you guys is that I think 7-footers are one of the most nasty post score heights in the game as well, because of how there's so many more attribute points. You don't have to be such a one-dimensional, I'm the biggest, problem ever created on offense, on some Shaquille O'Neal, or just like going as super crazy tall and heavy as you possibly can, and then you're a complete defensive liability when you're playing against poppers and outside bigs and stuff like that, or people who do what me and Tanner do on 2s, where we have a stretch big ISO, these types of guys right here, these 3, when they are out there matched up on him, on his 6'11", we just give him the ball, tell him to go for the midi fades, and then I'm crashing rebound on a 6'9" as just playing the inside, while the point guard has to deal with me on the rebounding, and we don't let teams switch or anything like that, or else we just get free buckets. So, point being is that I don't believe in these 3 heights very much when it comes to their perimeter defensive ability, and after patch that matters a lot in my opinion. You can't just get away with sitting paint like you used to for the first month of the game, and even still, I don't believe in as much when you compare it to the 7-footer, because these get so many more attribute points. My boy Apollo has a 7-foot post score, and it looks like the most devious thing I've ever seen. It just gets so many attribute points. It's like 99 post control with crazy high close shot. It can still shoot with midi and 3-pointer. It can still pass the ball with high pass ac. It has perimeter and steal at 60 steal for the interceptor. It's got like solid enough prim to be respectable. Good block, interior, rebound, all that. It's like insane, bro. I've never seen something like it. And it just looks so good in comparison. So that's why I am also still rating it S tier, as well as we're not even just talking about post scores. This is the best big man height on 5s, period. If you load up a game of like 5v5 Pro-Am or Proving Grounds 5v5 and stuff like that, or just the Pro-Am like comp matchups and stuff like that, of the matchup chats, the leagues, all that, it's gonna be a 7-foot at the 5 every single time, pretty much. You're hard pressed to not find a 7-footer on the court anywhere when it comes to 5s. Now, the problem is they're very non-usable on 3s, in my opinion. I think anything taller than 6'10", in my opinion, is just not good on 3s. That's just my take on it, because on 3v3, it's so much more 3-point oriented. It's very important to get as many points out of a possession as you can, and now with it being so 3-hunt based, it's hard to really get away with having such a tall big on the court, where you can't play lanes very respectably in comparison to how the 6'9" through like 6'7" can. Obviously, you can bring a lot to the table rebounding-wise, but so do those builds. They can still snag up really good, especially with their speed and ability to transition between going from pick and roll into down below the basket and getting those boards. And I don't know, just overall, I don't believe 7-footers belong on the 3v3 court very much. But where they do belong is still 2s. You see a lot of guard center combos on 2v2 where it's like a 6'4" or shorter point guard that's like anywhere from, I would say, the 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" range, stuff like that, and then a 7-foot at the big. And they're like doing pick and pops, pick and rolls, Great rebounder, interior defender, still good. It's there to counter post scorers as well, and you could be a post scorer yourself as a 7-footer, as I mentioned with Apollo. So overall, best big height in the game, bar none. It's not even close, and I don't even think it's worth discussing any other height as a big besides 6'9", maybe 6'10", and you could argue 7'1". That's why we're gonna have it in the C tier, because it's still a decent height. It still brings enough to the table offensively in terms of, like, you know, if you wanted to be a center with it, it's not too slow, but it is still kind of slow. But it's not like 7'2", 7'3" slow or anything like that. Now, obviously, take my ratings on the 7'3" and the 7'2" with a grain of salt, because obviously they still can be good as a post scorer, but that is it. You don't want to be anything other than that, in my opinion. 7'1's where you max out as a stretch big. If you want to make a stretch and be 7'1 rather than 7 foot, I suppose you could do that. It's cool enough because 7'1s get limitless range in the tier 2 slot, so it unlocks a new capability that anything shorter than that was not able to unlock, like 6'11", 6'10", and 7 foot. But 7'1 overall, just a little bit more of a mediocre height, if you ask me. Doesn't bring a ton to the table, especially not with the extra attributes, you know, in comparison to 7 foot, but it works out good. It's still a good height. But anyway, moving along to the 7'2 and the 7'3. We're going to have the 7'2 in the D tier all by itself, and the 7'3 is actually going to end up in the E tier. So this is just, like I said, a pretty bad height. Now, I do understand I may have lost to some 7'3s out there who are like, oh, Laker, my E tier 7'3 beat you like so bad because I was just post score mashing you. I understand that might be the case on 1s, 2s, stuff like that. They don't fit anywhere on 3s, and then 5s, I think they're extinct too. I just don't believe in them. They're too slow. They just can't get up and down the court at all. So anything with a full court setting, it's just a terrible build. Simple. It's like one of the worst you could ever imagine, because it just can't guard the perimeter, can't be put in the pick and roll at all. If you can be put in the pick and roll, you better believe he's sitting in the drop playing no help D on the paint or on the pick and roll at all, and it's just going to be free roaming city for your, like, you know, point guards coming off the screens and stuff like that, and you can't do anything other than guard the paint with this. So I know some of y'all might be in the rec center with the 7'3 as well, and you just sit paint and hope your opponent misses threes, or you just spot it up on him and doing your best to guard the perimeter, and you might do well on the 7'3 because it's so big and hard to guard. But I just don't really think I'm a fan of it when you really could be doing the exact same thing on builds that are just a slight bit shorter but have so much more speed, so much more prim D, so much more steal ability with, like, at least the bronze interceptor, agility, stuff like that. Like, and those ratings are pretty cheap, especially when they're at the low level. So I'm just not a fan of 7'3", 7'2". 7'1", again, like I said, respectable post height. I think it's plenty good as far as, like, the speed and versatility while still being dominant in the paint. And then 7 foot reigns supreme as far as, like, that type of availability and just, like, you know, value, if you will. But this is my tier list right here. I think this is respectable. I think I see a lot of these heights in the game right here at the top. You'd be hard-pressed not to find them. 6'2", 6'3", 6'7", 6'8", 7 foot. A lot of our current lineups make up by pretty much all these heights as well. And then 5'9", 6'9", still very common heights as well, but have their own little deficiencies, especially the 5'9", you know, has a couple drawbacks. You could argue this maybe does belong in the B tier instead, but I still think when people use them properly and most doably, they belong up here. But I don't know. Let me know if you think that's a little bit jaded to say 7'3s belong in the E tier, but 5'9s belong in the A tier. I just think that they bring a lot more to the table offensively and don't get exposed defensively quite as bad. Obviously, it's a little bit more of a walking bucket per se, but these are just hard pressed to play any proper defense, or like also just are a little bit of a liability to the teammates on the court when it comes to their lack of being able to guard their own guy on the perimeter. But I don't know, you could argue the same thing for the 5'9s. Let me know if you think I should have dropped this down a tier, put the 5'9 in the B or something like that. If you were to do that, let's say I just did do that, right? This is what it'd be looking a little bit more like. And I guess you could argue this is maybe more along the lines of a respectable tier list. I think if I were to do something like this, though, I think you have to maybe drop the 5'11 into the C tier, though. So, I don't know. I think overall, I would prefer to leave my list exactly how it was, but if you were to drop the 5'9 down because you don't believe in its ability to play any defense and you think that's not worth the offensive investment that it gets, I think you need to drop the 5'11 down as well. And this is more along the lines of what you'd be looking at. But we're going to go ahead and just put those back to how they were, because I do believe that we had this set up the right way, personally. But anyway, that's the list. I hope y'all enjoyed. If you did, feel free to drop a like, sub if you're new to noties, all good stuff. Like always, try to 2,000 likes. And if you made it to the end of the video, put your favorite height in the comments. George Sports all the way through. Anything 5'9 through 7'3. Just drop it in the comments. George Sports all the way to the end of the video. But anyway, that's all. If you have any different feedback you want to leave, you feel like you had some different opinions, feel free to leave that in the comments as well. But anyway, that's all. Hope you enjoyed. And that, take it easy, man. Peace.